I'm here with Professor, I should say, Dr. Dennis Kinsey, who owns a PhD in mass communications from Stanford University and is now a professor and director of public diplomacy here at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. So I want to thank you for joining me, and I would love just to get more of a background and hear more about what you do and your role here at Newhouse.
Well, thank you, Dylan. I getting called doctor is kind of strange. I feel like I should start writing prescriptions or something at that point. But yeah, I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk with you today. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a professor here at the Newhouse School, as you said, and I started here quite a few years ago, back in 1995. Prior to that, I was working on my PhD out of Stanford, as you mentioned, from 90 to 94. Then I was a visiting professor at Boston University and Stanford for that year between 94 and 95. Prior to that, for 10 years, I was a political consultant in Cleveland, Ohio, at a place called Decision Research Corporation, a public opinion research firm and political consulting firm. And I was there for about 10 years and decided that I wanted to start doing research that wasn't proprietary. That is, the research we were doing for our clients, for our politicians, for the cities, municipalities, for our public relations firms and agencies, was all proprietary. You would conduct the research and you would consult with the client, and then you would put that research on the shelf. And I thought we were learning some things, finding some interesting things out about public opinion, political behavior, persuasion, attitudes. And so part of the reason for me wanting to go back to school to get a PhD was to conduct research that wasn't proprietary and to teach. And, as when I was at Decision Research Corporation, I would often be a guest lecturer in a class, for example. And I thought, this is pretty cool. I like this. And so that's kind of my brief background. And I'm from Ohio, by the way.
Good state to be from. Like what you were mentioning before with a lot of your work, whether it was with clients, corporate clients, or politicians, PR agencies themselves, I was really interested in that, just learning also from classes that I've taken with you also. And it's been something of great interest to me. So what I wanted to learn more about was just kind of the whole process of coordinating strategies with your clients, with politicians, in order to help them reach their own goals, but also working within your own firm, and just how, as a leader, I know you were a vice president, how you kind of manage that.
Yeah, I really loved working with politicians. I think, and I think we were fortunate because the politicians we worked with were really interested in public service. They truly believed that what they were doing and why they were doing it was to help their constituents and help people. And boy, I tell you, you can't help but get motivated when you know that you're working with someone with those kind of motives. And so, fundamentally what we would do, and we had, our clients were at all different levels. We would have, city councilman John Zayak, who ran for city council of Cleveland. He was involved, and we were involved with him. But we'd have state representatives, and then frequently, as they moved up, we would move up with them. And so basically the way it would work is we would meet with the client, the candidate, or the incumbent if they were already in office. And we would talk about, pretty much find out about their issue positions, their views. And we would then, most of the research we did, probably 90%, was survey research. And because we wanted to know what the electorate felt and what percent were for this person and what percent maybe not, or who was undecided, how they viewed the issues, how they viewed the candidate. And so we would ask, our initial surveys for these people were long. We would have 70 question items, for example, in a benchmark survey, testing everything, testing all of their issue positions, testing other issues that we knew about, because we were a political consulting firm. So we understood what was going on locally as well as nationally and internationally. We would test those things if we thought those might come up in the campaign. We would always ask, you know, as a consultant, you needed to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so we would ask about everything. And this would make some candidates a little uncomfortable, but those who were successful in office for a while, they understood that this was important to know, because in political campaigning in the United States, for sure, you're going to get attacked. If your opponent is going to attack you, and it's kind of natural. I mean, your opponent needs to give the voters a reason not only to vote for you, but why they should vote for the incumbent. And so we always tested those things. We always tested potential attacks. And, you know, it would be fundamentally a question like, what if you knew that Congressman X did this or that? Would that make you more likely or less likely to vote for him? And then with those data, we would know whether we needed to address this early on, you know, inoculate ourselves from it, or if we would even need to counter it if it became an attack, if it was important enough, or if it didn't matter to voters. Yeah. And then, so we would strategize the whole campaign around the candidate, the candidate's issues, characteristics of the candidate, the incumbent, if we were going up against the incumbent, or if we were the incumbent, the challengers, you know, what the challengers' issues, what they were likely to use against us or for them, also the demographics of our district and how different segments of the population might be viewing the issues or our candidate. And it would be pretty elaborate. You know, we would start with a questionnaire probably that had 100 question items. And then we would start working on whittling it down to the essence. And for a benchmark, that's still, you know, 70 question items.
Yeah.
And then once we would do that to start the campaign, we wouldn't just wait till the end. Most of our candidates, we would do tracking surveys, and we would see how is the campaign going? What's our strategy? Is it working? So we would measure things during the campaign and then adjust if we have to. The one thing that I would say that a lot of people think candidates, Becca, one thing I admired about the candidates we worked for, they had issue positions. This is where they stood. And they weren't going to change based on our survey results. And if people weren't for them or it felt differently. And they had that integrity. And I think when you look at what people want in their politicians and their elected officials, they want people who have the highest degree of honesty and integrity, and they don't change their views because of the wind of public opinion, for example, unless they're convinced and that's the way to go. But they're not just doing something to get elected. They're doing something for much more noble reasons, for public service, for giving back, for improving the lives of people. And people are willing to vote for you, even if they don't agree with you on every single issue. And I think what's more important, and the research that we've done over and over and over again, what's more important is the character of the candidate, the integrity, the honesty, not all the issues. And so I loved being in politics at that point. I loved doing the research for good candidates. I loved kind of analyzing those data, thinking about strategy, and then working with other members of the campaign, because we were the research arm, and we would typically work with the media consultants and typically work with the campaign managers, as well as the candidate. And the candidates were always just a lot of fun to work with because they're so different, and it makes you wonder, why would you run for office? I mean, you know, you've got to have thick skin to run for public office, because there are going to be some people are going to say, yeah, other people are just going to be killing you and just saying the worst things about you. And so that I admire that as well for these people who run for office.
Did you ever run into issues like that where candidates that you were working with maybe got discouraged by how the campaign was going, and maybe they were getting swayed by public opinion and having to manage that as well?
In some respect, yes, but it was more like this. like sometimes we would work for the state of Ohio, for example. We were a Democratic polling firm for Democrats, so we would only poll for Democratic candidates, and there were Republican pollsters who would only poll for Republicans, and you really had to pick one side or the other because you know, again, you would know the good, the bad, the ugly of your candidate, and you didn't want the candidate to think you're going to go work for the opposition at some point, you know. So you had to pick one side or the other, and so we would often work for the state's Democratic Party, and the way they would do a lot of their elections, especially at the state representative level, is they would kind of consult with 4, 5, or 6 or 7 candidates running for office. And we would do the polling for all of those. And the real hard part was then when we would determine that candidate X doesn't have a chance of winning. And so the state then would say, well, we're going to move any of our support from that candidate over to candidate A, who is really close and just needs a little bit more money, a little bit. And it would be heartbreaking to hear the staff of these candidates who the state would put into place, and these were state folks, and they would be begging us not to give up on this candidate, you know, that this candidate really does have a chance and things are turning around. And we see that a lot when you get involved in a campaign, when you're so close to it, you know, it looks like, you know, you're just emotionally attached. Yeah. And unfortunately, there's not enough money, at least there wasn't when we were doing it, to successfully support every candidate in terms of what they need, you know, their television, their radio, their brochures, you know, the campaign activities. And so we really did have to choose. And if a candidate didn't have a chance of winning, and we could tell that with our polling and research, then we weren't going to keep throwing, the state was not going to keep throwing money at them. They were going to put it where maybe we could win a seat. So that was one of the heartbreaks that we would see. Other times, you know, I guess we were fortunate. We never really had to worry about a candidate changing their opinion on something just to win an election. And you know, I know other candidates do that, and others have had that problem, but I never did have that problem. I think that would have been so discouraging to me, frankly, because there's more to it than winning an election. And often in politics, you have to run more than once to win. You know, sometimes the first time out of the box, that's just, you're just getting noticed, you're getting awareness, and you know, you don't necessarily win. You have to plan on running more than once to do it. But specifically to your question, no, I didn't have any candidates actually have to do that. We did have some candidates who we had to argue with about campaign strategy, because, you know, sometimes candidates say, here's what I want to do. And we'll say that's not going to work, or you're not understanding what's really important to your voters. I know this issue is important to you and you want to keep talking about it, but they don't care about that issue. Here's the other thing that you need to address. So we had some battles like that. And the worst thing I think that we did or had to deal with was candidates would like to release positive poll data that kind of shows that they're winning or that people support them in this or that. And we would go to battle with candidates a few times because we refused to release partial numbers. We said, if you're going to release the poll, you have to release the entire poll. You know, again, we're looking for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and nobody wanted to release the entire poll. And so we had a few members of Congress who were a little upset about that, but they understood in the end. And it's part of our reputation as well on the line. You know?
Absolutely.
And so I never did like that strategy. And I've seen it, people working against us, pollsters working against us, they would release just the positive information, just the positive questions. And we were polling at the same time. And so we knew those as well, but we also knew all the negative stuff as well, and they weren't releasing it.
Yeah, like that's just an issue of transparency. And I feel like, you know, that happens across so many other different industries too, which is, you know, a problem, just like from an ethical standpoint. But I know you mentioned before, like how research is kind of one of the arms of a political campaign. So I was just wondering if you can elaborate on just how important that arm is in terms of building out a successful campaign for a politician.
Yeah, research is really, I think it's just crucial.
Mhm.
And in politics, I think that field got it early on. They realized early on that we need to understand the voters. We need to understand if they know us, if they know our opponents, if they know people who might support us and how they feel about them, and how they feel on all these issues. And it's all about the strategy. It's all about kind of pulling it all together with your vision, the candidate's vision, understanding where the voters are, and then making it work. I think that, and this is one of the reasons why the benchmark surveys are so large, because there's so much to gather, so much information to gather right away. And then why the tracking surveys are important as well, because you can't just set your strategy and then go and hope that it works, and then on election day. The thing that I loved about politics too is you had a due date. You knew whether you were successful or not, and that was during election day. And our polling was so precise. In fact, I don't know why I didn't start betting. I should have been betting on these elections. I could have made a fortune, but we never did. But we would also frequently go to the Board of Elections on election night and hang out there with everybody. And we could tell, we knew based on what precincts were coming in, and we even knew with the absentee ballots, they used to be counted first in a lot of those elections. We could tell by the absentee ballots, based on the historical record, whether our candidate was going to win or not. And that was really disheartening to our candidates, because even before all the votes are in, we would know, and we could talk to them and tell them, and they were like, no, there's still, people are still voting, but we knew. And I think why research is important is, if you don't have the research in a campaign, you're just really going out blindly.
Yeah.
You're not sure, you have your issues, but you don't know if those are important to the electorate or not. You don't know who's already supporting you, who's not supporting you, who's undecided, because you will approach those different groups differently. If they're not supporting you, you're going to try to ignore them. You don't want to bring any attention to it. Those who are supporting you, you want to reinforce that. So you got to understand why they're supporting you. Those that are undecided, you got to understand why they're undecided. Maybe they just don't know you. Maybe they don't know where you stand on the issues. Maybe, there could be a ton of reasons. And so all the messaging that a candidate has, and all that building relationships and opening doors of communication between you and the electorate. If you don't have, if you don't have the research to understand that, you might be knocking on the wrong door. So that, I think it's crucially important, and it's very sophisticated in politics. The research in politics is just extremely sophisticated. The testing of messages, the testing of advertising is really quite at the highest level.
Yeah. I always found it interesting too, and just the amount of money that goes into it also is just insane. But I was also, just one of my last questions is just an example of when a research campaign that you've led provided great benefit to a client, whether it's politics or a firm or just maybe a more corporate client, like anything that you can think of that really made an impact on you and your career.
Yeah, it's a story that I tell a lot, and you've heard it in the research class, and even in campaigns I'll bring it up. It's this this community college levy that was in Tri-C in Cuyahoga Community College, and it was 10 years since they were on the ballot, and they were on the ballot to ask voters to continue to support them with their tax monies. And to actually increase their support. So it was going to be a big campaign. And so, we did the typical things. We did the survey up front, and we found that, people generally liked Tri-C. They understood this value in the community, but they were split on what Tri-C's role should be in the community. And so just knowing that alone probably saved Tri-C, and we won that election. because we were able then to develop a campaign strategy that didn't emphasize one role over the other, but first of all, Tri-C did both of those things, and we had to make sure that the voters understood that. So that was an important one. And I just because of education in general, whether it's a university, a college, a trade school, or community college, I think, you know, education is crucially important. So I love that we were able to help Tri-C, kind of expand. The other one was again in Cleveland. It was a Cleveland school levy, and the Cleveland schools, when I was there, they were just in terrible shape, just absolutely terrible shape. And people knew they were terrible, and they didn't like the fact that they were terrible, and they kept punishing the schools, because every time the schools would come on the ballot, which is about every year for like 10 or 13 years, asking voters for an increase in funds, increase in tax monies, so we can hire more teachers or improve the facilities or buy more books. The voters were just so upset at the schools, they would vote no, you don't deserve it, no. And of course, the schools get worse then, they don't get better. And so we were finally hired to work with the Cleveland city schools to pass a levy. And everyone, announcers on television and they were all talking about, this is going to fail again. It's going to be the worst defeat ever. And we ended up passing it. And I think we passed it because of the research and really trying to understand what was behind voters' initial voting of no for that thing. They knew that the schools needed money. They knew that the schools actually were getting better, but they still wanted to punish them somehow. And so we were able to kind of take that information, develop a campaign strategy to actually win the election and give the schools the needed funds that they needed. And again, everyone was shocked because everyone thought this was going down again for like the 13th time. But we won that. So those are the two. And I guess, I don't know, it's interesting that they're both schools.
Yeah.
I never thought of that because we worked on a lot of issues. Schools were a minor part of what we actually did. But so those are the two that really stick out to me.
Yeah, that is interesting that they're both schools, but it goes to show it's important, to make sure that they run properly, gives, the next generation the best chance of being successful. So it's another, tip of the hat to some of the work that you've done. But my last question is, like, now, you're more in a leadership role within Newhouse now, and I was just wondering how it's kind of similar to the prior leadership positions you've been in with research, but then also how it's been different and how your experience has been with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't get into higher education to become an administrator.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to teach and do research. And at one point, David Rubin at the time was a dean. He said, you got to be chair of the department. You got to, because not necessarily because I was so great that I had to be chair, but he basically was, there's no one else left. Everyone else has been chair. You got to take your turn. I said, I turned him down over and over and over again. I said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it because administrative work. I was, I did that at Decision Research Corporation, and I wanted to leave kind of that behind. And he said, no, you got to do it. So I was chair for a short time, and while I was chair, it's interesting. I had there was an international relations master's student from Maxwell came and talked to me to see if he could take some public relations courses.
Okay.
And we figured out, yeah, he could. He ended up doing the entire degree. So he had 2 master's degrees, one in international relations, one in public relations. And he really had the idea of starting a public diplomacy program, which is kind of the intersection of public relations and international relations. And so So that's what we did. We kind of worked through the process. I worked through my my counterpart up at Maxwell, who was in charge of international relations. We met with our respective deans, talked about a master's degree in public diplomacy that would basically take, half the courses from Maxwell, half the courses from Newhouse. They thought it was a great idea. We started getting that vetted through all of our committees. So at the Newhouse side, it had to go through the dean, of course, and then the PR department had to vote on it. Then the Newhouse Curriculum Committee had to vote on it. Then the Newhouse Graduate Program Committee had to vote on it. Then the Newhouse full faculty had to vote on it. Then up at Maxwell was going through similar processes. And then we had to take it to the University Curriculum Committee, University Graduate Program Committee. The University Senate had to vote on it. And then the Board of Trustees wanted to hear about it. And so I was excited to go to the Board of Trustees because Donovan McNabb was on the board at that time. And I said, oh, it would be great to get to meet him. He wasn't there, unfortunately. So, but the board loved it. And at every step, people were saying, it was kind of like, what took you so long? It's about time. You should have been doing this 2 years ago. So it was a great idea that Ali Ramji had. He was the student from Maxwell. And so we got it all approved through the university, and then the state of New York had to approve it. And so, but they did too, like lightning fast. And so that's how I got to become the director of the public diplomacy program, which is still going on. And in fact, before talking to you today, I was contacting some applicants who applied, sending them more information and that sort of thing, because I think today is decision day. So trying to make sure they have everything they need for that. And then at some point, the Dean Lorraine Branham asked me to be the director of our PhD program, the director of the PhD program. So again, I don't want to do any of this. I want to teach, not just teach, but I want to teach. I want to conduct research. But so I'm, I was director of the PhD program for about 10 years until this year. And then our new associate dean for research, she's now the director of the PhD program, as well as being the associate dean for research. And then just recently, a couple years ago, I became a provost faculty fellow for the university. And it's a project that they assigned me to. That's it's called a faculty portfolio system. It's a kind of digitizing all of faculty's materials across campuses, enterprise wide. It's so that faculty will have maybe a fuller picture of their activities, their research, their creative activities, their artistic activities, publications, and all of that. It's for the university, so I'm kind of involved in that right now. But looking forward to actually stopping all of these things, tell you the truth, and get back to what I want to do.
Yeah, well, it's nice that they've trusted you with these roles too. So, but yeah, I can understand. That's a lot to take on. But but I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you so much.
Happy to do it, Dylan. Thanks for asking me.
All right. Thank you. Have a great weekend. I'll see you in class on Monday.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you again. Bye-bye.